Welcome to the first episode of the Life Endurance Podcast, where we study methods of unlocking your true potential and explore the greatest endurance race we all partake in, life. In this episode, I just want to give a little introduction to myself and what my mission with this podcast is. So, my name is Austin Shadle. I'm an engineer, an endurance athlete, and a proud dog dad. I'm also a big advocate of mental health. And the primary reason I want to do this podcast, really the basis behind any of my social media content, is that I really want to inspire others and try to make a difference in the world. So for me, a big question was, okay, how do I go about trying to make a difference? And the kind of dichotomy of that where, okay, I want to impact others' lives, but I'm also a firm believer that, I only get the one life. So I want to make sure I'm fulfilled, but I also want to impact others. And then there's the fact that if you know me, I'm really not a political person. I don't like politics. I understand how it's important, and a lot of people, they try to make their impact by being very outspoken, whatever it is people do in politics. And then there's this other question of, I only get this one life. I want to help people, but I want to do it efficiently. And part of that is you can only really help the people that are willing to let you help them. And it's been difficult for me. Like I've always tried to be a very encouraging, giving person. If there's anybody that I think I could help, I try to help them. But, if you do that over and over and just the people, like they're not even either accepting the help or they're not interested in, say, improving the aspect of their life that you'd like to help them with, you're just going to burn yourself out, or you're like, okay, what's the point? And then eventually I really got into listening to podcasts, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is a kind of solution to that problem where, okay, if somebody's listening to my podcast, then, okay, by default, they want to listen to me, or they want to, if they're listening to a self-development podcast like this one ultimately is, they're in the business of trying to better themselves. So I'm like, okay, I really want to do a podcast. I like listening to podcasts. I love talking to people. I have just a lot of thoughts in my head. And then the big struggle that I've had with, any successful person has gone through or probably still goes through is that sort of imposter syndrome where, okay, I'm 26. I'm still pretty early in my life. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a professional athlete by any means. I'm not to any level where I'd get celebrity just based off of, those sort of accolades. So I always struggled with the sort of imposter syndrome, like, okay, why should people listen to me? And then I realized, one day recently, the last 5-6 years, I've been a very big self-development junkie. Any books I could read, people I follow, speeches, I just absorbed a lot of it. And I got to that point that I've heard other, like motivational speakers talk about, where you get to the point where you've kind of heard everything. You listen to something new and it's like, okay, that wasn't actually anything new to me. It's just you realize people, okay, repackage it in a different way. Okay, one person packages it in a way that speaks to others better. So then I realized, okay, well, that makes sense. So you're looking at like, okay, the self-development industry is massive, like $1 trillion industry if you're a business person, and there's so many people in it. So I'm sitting there like, okay, why do I have any right to try to contribute to that? I'm one of those people. I have very high goals for myself, and even successful people are like, I'm still nowhere near my goal. So why should I put out a podcast that's supposed to help people? But then I don't know who I was listening to, and they put it into perspective where all you have to be is a couple of steps ahead of somebody to be able to help them. Like if you're going through a maze or you're trying to solve like, I don't know, a puzzle or something, if you're a couple steps ahead of somebody, those couple steps, okay, you did it. It's not anything significant. You haven't even finished the puzzle yet, but you could make a dramatic difference in making it a lot easier for the people that haven't made it through those few steps. And then I also realized I'm on the younger side. I'm only 26 at the moment, but I've definitely lived through quite a bit. I was the type that in college, I was very focused on my studies, not like a super social person, self-development junkie. I'm an engineer, so I was studying physics, math all the time. An endurance athlete, so I guess I'll dig in a little of that when I say that. I've spent about a decade consistently running long distance races, numerous half marathons. I've only done one standalone marathon. I hope to change that soon. But I've done a 50K. I'm also a triathlete. I spent a solid 3 years fairly consistently doing triathlons. I did a couple half Ironmans, and then this last year in 2021 in September, I completed the Maryland Ironman in 13 hours and 46 minutes, I believe. So like I said, no, it's not a pro time by any means, but I was like middle of the pack, a very respectable time. My goal is just to break 15 hours. So endurance sports is a big part of my life. And as I move forward on this podcast, I hope to be able to talk to other endurance athletes. And I want to relate it to how endurance sports can be something that really can help everybody in their life. But so that's for another day. So that's a bit of my endurance background. But so yeah, I was a very study focused person in college. And then I jumped into a construction management role on wind farms. I was working a 60-hour work week, was like a short work week at that job. So I spent a couple of years just working my butt off. After I switched jobs to a more reasonable number of hours, everybody knows COVID hit. That was in the 2020 range. So COVID hit. There was a little goofy. That's when I started just training for my Ironman. And then now I have since tried to go off on my own for business. I've had different side gigs, meeting a lot of different people. And it hit me that when you're the type of person that, okay, you've really deep dived in a subject, it just becomes like normal. It's like the norm for you. Or if you've spent so much time listening to self-development people, how to improve yourself like I have, those thoughts they're just normal for me to have. Or like the way I analyze, okay, how did I go about this? Or how can I improve this part of my life? But then since it's so normal for you, you forget, okay, this isn't normal for other people. I'm an endurance athlete. Going for a 6-mile run is like just another day. To most people, a 6-mile run's like, man, I'd be happy if I could do that after maybe a couple months of training. And that's something I hope to dispel and influence people on. Getting into endurance sports does not take quite as much as you think, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but I digress again. So I realized that I was meeting more people, and I just realized, okay, a lot of people still haven't invested time in like the self-development world. Some of the books that I've read, that if you talk to somebody who's into self-development, it's like, oh yeah, everybody's read that, everybody knows this. A lot of people really haven't, and it's just one of those things where, like I said, you're so ingrained in it, you don't realize that other people aren't. So when it came to that imposter syndrome, I'm like, okay, no, I'm not an Ed Milet, I'm not a David Goggins, I'm not a Tony Robbins, a Dean Graziosi, but in a lot of these cases, I am a few steps ahead of a lot of people. And then back to the point where I want to make a difference, I feel like this podcast is where I can put my thoughts out there, and as long as I push and share it, then the right people that want to listen will listen, and hopefully I can make a difference. And the primary difference that I want to make is, just like I said at the beginning, really unlocking people's true potential. Because I just see the world does a scary good job of blinding you from and putting you in this imaginary bottleneck on your potential. When you get into self-development, or for me, I'm really trying to figure out this whole self-made business thing, you realize that there's so many people that they started with way less than you, they're at way more of a disadvantage. Or there's people like, okay, I made it through engineering school. On an objective level, I'm very above average intelligence. Like, I'll fully admit, I'm a total dork, a big nerd when it comes to science and all that stuff. And you can tell by the way I talk about things, what I get excited about. But then I realize, there's a lot of people out there, they didn't do that. Maybe they barely made it through high school, but they just applied themselves and they had a mission and they stuck with it, and they've accomplished greater things than I probably even will in my life. So what I want to do with this is share the tools that I've learned. And also, I want to make this a very relatable podcast. So just relate it to my own struggles, how I've succeeded and accomplished things in the past, what I'm struggling with now. Because that's one of the things I love about a lot of podcasts is that, it's something that can be very relatable. You can listen to it wherever you are. And say you're in a spot in your life where maybe you're feeling a bit lonely, or you don't feel like you have all these thoughts in your head, these ambitions, and you don't know what to do about it. So I want to make this podcast something relatable, because if you want to make an impact, people to listen to you, you have to make it relatable. And it's also a little scary, because I want to be vulnerable and transparent, because there's a lot of power in that, and like really sharing your story, because a lot of people only share the good things, and it's kind of hard to relate, or it makes you feel like, oh, they only have good stuff going on, I have some of this bad stuff, I'm never going to make it to the level they're at, whereas that's just not true. So when I'm trying to think about where I want to make a difference in the world, one is just self-development. Obviously, it's something that I've invested a lot of time, thought into. I'm very passionate. If you know me, if you've ever encountered me, if you say like, oh, I want to go do this thing, I will instantly, I'm just like, yeah, do it. How can I help? I want to be there and like help support people. And there's another aspect of life that is always really intimidating to talk about. It's this difficult subject, and that is mental health. And, it's just one of those, like, weirdly personal things. And then, really, especially if you're a dude these days, there's just there's still a lot of pressure to just suck it up, bottle it up. And I'm definitely very guilty of doing that. But at the same time, maybe eventually I'll go over my mental health struggles. And again, I want it to be relatable. I want people who have the same struggles to know, okay, there's other people out there like with these problems. Everything I do, I try to lead by example. So despite these roadblocks I had, I still went. I still completed an Ironman. I got an engineering degree, which for me, I still consider the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. I've got large business ambitions. So the other realm of life that I want to help make a difference is one that, it's always a sensitive topic. It's difficult to put out there and share your own experience, but I very much want to be an advocate of mental health. I think that is, one of the biggest problems we face today. I don't think our country, the systems we have in place, support and understand the kind of issue that it is. So with this podcast, again, I want to address some of those subjects and hopefully be able to have people relate with similar issues that I've had, show them how I've gotten past that and I've accomplished some great things. Eventually, once I have my life positioned correctly, I want to get into ultra marathons. And I also want to be able to bring in guests and get other perspectives on mental health, the things that have helped them. And just I want to be able to provide value to people. If they listen to the podcast, I want them to be able to relate and hopefully get something from it. With that, just a very brief little intro about me, what I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast. And I want it to be a mix of, it'll be just me kind of maybe deep diving in a subject, bringing up a story, something that I think could add value. And I'd also like to say, honestly, this podcast is very much, I'm doing it for myself as well, reaffirming the things, reminding myself how far I've come, reaffirming the tools that are out there that you can use to compound those goals and make more and more progress, even when facing adversity. And then I also want to try to get other interesting people on, just have conversations with them. Again, that's what part of the things that made me fall in love with just listening to podcasts is the ones that are just, a very organic conversation. Typically, I want to try to have, a bit of a focused topic, but just have a nice conversation with people. And like I mentioned earlier, I want to try to talk to other endurance athletes and relate that to just life in general. I know I've already recorded a podcast with a certified health coach that I know, so looking forward to putting that out. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to this journey. I want to hopefully to add value to people's lives, add value to my own life, reaffirm the things that I've learned, and to ultimately make a difference. So with that, I appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for more content that's going to be much more focused, some actionable items. So I want to end it off with a quote. Remember that the individual who says they can and the individual who says they can't are both right. So it's you who chooses which one you are.